Kia ora. In this video I'm going to show you the different types of tools used in the workshop. The first tool I'm showing you is a rip saw. This is a hack saw, this is a tenon saw, and this is a coping saw. The first saw we're looking at is a rip saw. Now a rip saw is used to cut across the grain rough pieces of work. Its teeth, as shown here, are extremely large. This allows the cut to be done quickly. However, it also means that the cut is very rough. That is why it's not good to use for accurate saw lines. Because the teeth cut roughly, it means that the edges will need cleaning up. Also, because the teeth are large, means it can only be used on wood. It can be used for metal or plastic, however this will cause charring in those materials and will require much more cleaning up. The next saw that I'm showing you is a tenon saw. Now a tenon saw belongs to the family, the back plate family. As you can see here, it has a back plate across the back. This holds the blade tightly, which means that it does not move. The tenon saw has a medium-sized teeth, so therefore it is good to use to cut accurate joint lines. So if you are cutting a woodwork joint, this will cut it nice and straight if used correctly. It also produces a nice finish in the wood with very little splintering. Because it has medium teeth, it can be used on plastics also. However, the plastics will blunt the teeth a lot quicker than the wood will. The next saw is a coping saw. This coping saw has an extremely small blade, as you can see here. The teeth of it, however, are medium, much like the tenon saw. The coping saw blade, because it's small, means that you can cut a curve with it. The main difference between a tenon saw and the coping saw are, one, the small blade, but the main difference is that the teeth face towards the handle. On a rip saw and on a tenon saw, the teeth face away from the handle. This means that the coping saw cuts as you pull it forward, not as you push it. Okay? This allows for more accuracy in the cut. The final saw shown here is a hacksaw. This is used to cut metal. As you can see, its teeth are extremely small. This means that as you are cutting metal, there is not much splintering. This saw can be used on wood and plastic. However, because it has small teeth, it means that the teeth will get blocked very quickly and not enable a clean cut. An important piece of equipment when using any type of saw is a bench hook. You can see here a bench hook is literally 3 pieces of wood nailed together to create a hook that can go on the bench. This allows you to support materials whilst you are cutting. The first saw I'm showing you to use is a rip saw. Now, when you are cutting, it is extremely important to have your shoulder in line. As you can see here, your shoulder and hand should all be in one straight line. If you see here, my shoulder, my elbow and my wrist are all in line. This allows you to cut a straight cut. What you must do is, the key to any cutting is keeping your wrist straight and your elbow and your shoulder in line. It should be one movement, as demonstrated here. It is very much like a punch forward. When you're cutting, you can see I grip like I would a tennis racket. However, my opinion is that to hold the saw is just the most comfortable way that you seem fit. Some people like to put a finger along here. However, that is up to you and not a necessity. When you are cutting, as you can see what I have just done, I have taken it back a few times. This creates a groove. It will not cut as such, but it creates a groove in the work that allows the blade to stop wobbling. You can see here with my stance that my feet are apart and that my shoulder, my elbow and my wrist are all in line. When I'm sawing, I'm using the hold of the blade. I'm not going backwards and forwards in a small movement, but using the whole of the blade as such. This creates a much easier cut and is quicker. Now, as you can see here, the rip saw creates a very rough cut. You can see here that there are lots of splinters. That is why it is used just to cut wood to size and not used to cut accurate joints. Next we will use the tenon saw. This is used very much the same way as a rip saw, in making sure that your elbow and your wrist and your shoulder are all in line with where you want to cut. When you hold it, again, that is up to you, your preference. You cut on the inside of the line and take it back a couple of times, very much like a rip saw. Now when I cut here, I again use the hold of the blade once I have got my grooves. I'm constantly looking at the work, constantly making sure that I'm going straight. It is not a rush, it is about getting accurate. These saws will cut accurate if you keep your technique correct. As you saw here, I started cutting at an angle like this. However, after a little while, what I do is I get the saw straight. So start at an angle and then bring the saw straight. This creates an even cut. You can see from this diagram here, or this saw mark here, that I've cut on the inside of the lines. This means that I have my waist width on the inside and I haven't cut over the lines. If you cut on the line or on the clear side of the work, the area that you want will be too large. It is much easier to cut less and then take some off than it is to cut more and then try and replace. I will now just finish this cut. Now, it is extremely important. This is called a vise. This is used to hold materials. The bench hook here supports materials. That means they are loose. They would only stay in place with you pushing against them. The vise here will hold materials. This means that you do not have to have your hands holding it. Now often I see people putting their wood into the vise and then cutting down the lines with a tenon saw. This is not an accurate way of cutting because you cannot cut the whole way through. As you can see here, the blade and the back are smaller than the wood. Therefore, I will have to turn the wood around to get it to match. Now you you can see here I've had to turn the wood around to enable the cut to go all the way through. This cut is not as accurate. As you can see here, I have got one part here and one part here. This means that I would have to then spend more time cleaning up that edge of the cut. If it seems quicker to do it that way because you are cutting less surface area. However, to cut across the grain using a bench hook is actually the quicker method, even though it doesn't seem it. Because what you're enabling to do is you do not have to do any of the clear up. The next saw I'm showing you is the coping saw. Now, because it has a small blade, you can easily remove them. This shows you here, you untwist the handle, and then on each blade part, shown here, is a little hook. You can then just pop it off as such. Now, it is extremely important to check the blade on a coping saw to ensure that the teeth are going towards the handle, as this means that the coping saw gives more accuracy when cutting. Once put back in, just tighten the handle up again until the blade is under a good amount of tension. You can cut straight lines with a coping saw. However, what you will need to do is you will need to use a vise for this because of the design of to hold your material, because of the design of the coping saw. When putting your work in a vise, you do not have it high up. This will enable this height here, as shown here, is too high. What will happen is, as I come to cut the top, the work will move and potentially break. What you need to do is, if your work is too large, move it to one side of the vise and put it in nice and low, as shown. As discussed, any sawing, you have your elbow and shoulder and hand all straight, as shown there. Now this cuts on the pull. You can see it cuts on the pull. What I can do is turn my wrist, and this will enable me to cut curves. You can see here, I'm just turning my wrist whilst going backwards and forwards. If it is important that you must go backwards and forwards constantly to enable a clean cut. And you can see how by turning the wrist, keeping it going backwards and forwards, I can cut various wood curves in wood. Because of the small blade of the coping saw, if the wood is too thick, it will require a lot of work and potentially the blade will break. Therefore, you must ensure that the work you are trying to cut through is not too thick. Finally, a hacksaw. This is used very much the same way as a tenon saw. However, because the teeth are small, it is only used for metal. Thank you.